What's up, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jabro, and I'm here with
Steve. Hope everyone's doing well.
And for you guys who have never seen the show before, we're just two guys that like to talk over the biggest stories in gaming, but we always like to start with what we've been playing. So, Steve, what you been playing?
Yeah, so I'm going to jump into the big one that I've been playing. Came out right after our last episode, and we discussed me maybe picking it up. So, yeah, I've been playing Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. I've been playing a lot, so I'm pretty deep in. I want to say I'm about chapter 10. Each chapter is average about an hour, so I'm like 10 hours in, according to the little PlayStation thing you can check. And I am so surprised, beyond surprised, on how not just good. I would actually say this game is pretty great. Like, this game, skyrocketed. No pun intended. Skyrocketed to like the top of my list for like Game of the Year contender, and that's not even me just blowing smoke up there, because the game gets so much right. It gets a lot of like the critiques we had for, obviously the big thing we can compare it to is Avengers, and it is almost polar opposite, where we all know with Avengers, and we'll actually discuss a little bit of that today, how just unfocused it was, and this is so much more consolidated. It's more linear, and it's really about the universe, and I'm having such a great time. Some of the characters, I remember we had when we first saw the game, the game wasn't running the best, and a lot of the character designs were a little wonky. It grew on me. Peter Quill's new style, even though he has a weird haircut, that they actually confront in the game about his haircut being a little bit weird. It grew on me because, technically I've spent more time with this Peter Quill than we have obviously the MCU Peter Quill. So that's starting to grow on me. Drax still was kind of awkward, but I put all that aside, especially because if you really have an issue with the cosmetic, it's not a spoiler, you unlock the MCU costumes, so you can just put that right on, and it's there, cool. And you'll be fine. So they're in there as collectibles. It's actually it's surprisingly really well done, especially for Drax. Drax is the one that took me for a while to get used to, and then I unlocked the MCU version of it, so I was able to put that on there. So it's really well done. The characters are super, super faithful to what we've seen a little bit in the MCU, but mainly more in the comics. Lots of references, lots of Easter eggs, to the point where it's like I've really started looking into this more the galaxy side of the MCU, which of course this lined up with the Eternals. There's a lot of references, and so more of that space version of the MCU, when you're talking Adam Warlock and all these other things. Like, I'm starting to get a little interested, where I've done some research on some characters, because there's people who show up. Lady Hellbringer, which I do know from the comics, is in the game, and she is fantastic. What a fantastic rendition of her. The voice acting and the facial animations are really well done, and I'm glad I'm starting to see people discuss that, because the game is really fun gameplay-wise, but I think it's the small touches that hurt Avengers really works here, where lip syncing, facial animations, the actual emotion behind these lines, it's all really well done. Like, this feels really, really AAA, like really, really well polished. I actually do like this version of Gamora more than I do the MCU version. Not to take away from the MCU version, but reading some comics and playing other, some Marvel titles that she's in, this I can hands down say is the best representation to the Gamora I know. And I know there's like different versions of Gamora. I know there's like the time traveler version and the comics and stuff like that. But obviously the big one you're going to compare it to is the MCU version. And I do like this Gamora better. She vibes with the crew better. And it's just all really well done. Like, it's so believable, where the game at no point feels like just a cash grab. The way they argue, the way they talk, the way they're joking. The one big complaint is, like, the game... these characters are mature. We all know Rocket Raccoon is a trash-talking guy. Instead of obviously cursing, they use different space terms. So they use the word flark a lot, F-L-A-R-K. But they use it a lot, and to the point where in my brain I have to switch it to the actual F word, but it's still just like overly done, and so like there are points where it just gets too into itself, and it's like too cringy, where it's like you don't have to because even if in a world that you were just saying the F word, it would still be much. I'm like, why are you talking like that? But those are all minor complaints, and very minor game glitches and stuff that I've seen. Nothing game breaking. Sometimes I'll just clip on a corner and I have to boost out of there. So nothing breaking. The gameplay, obviously the moment-to-moment gameplay when you're playing as Peter Quill, Star-Lord, it's really well done. It's hard to kind of grasp where it is. It's like a really, really mobile Uncharted game is the kind of what I can go. And I know a lot of people have been making that comparison of the game in general being more just like space Uncharted, and they're not wrong. You're dashing around, but the multiplayer, the multi-team aspect of it makes so much sense when you're calling Gomorrah to do certain attacks. You're asking Groot to maybe tie down characters, and Rocket will throw a grenade to break shields, and you make all those commands. So it's so team-based heavy that it just really forces you to see the mistakes made in Avengers, which was this sort of forced multiplayer thing where it's just like shoved in your throat and everything's really awkward, where this, everyone just has a role and they're doing that role really well. And that's something that I got to give to Eidos Montreal, that they really knocked it out of the park with that. So I'm having a great time with the game. I've recommended it to anyone who's had any interest in, especially just the MCU movies. If you enjoyed those two MCU movies and you like, it's not an open world, bunch of side missions, things like, what you're doing and you really can't get lost. It's such a great experience, and a long experience from what I heard too. The game, I want to say, is like 18 chapters, so the average people are beating are like 16, 17 hours on their first playthrough, which knocks it out of the park. And I've been taking my time, not that there's so much to explore, but there's a lot of talking to your teammates and characters discussing, and a lot of like character building that you can do that's optional. Not that they lead too far in, but I do that, and again, I'm clocking away at the game, and it's just like keeps going and going. And every time you feel like it's gonna start peaking, it gets into a super action section or super comedy section in the game. Just there's so much of it, which I really like. So that's the bulk what I've been doing the last basically week and a half, 2 weeks. I try and knock out a chapter or two a day depending on the boss fight and what I'm doing in there. Very other little things that I've played. I've been still grinding a little bit of Back 4 Blood. I felt like I was not giving the game the true shot I wanted to. I felt like we weren't negative on the game. I think we were both pretty happy with it. It is basically Left 4 Dead 3.
Yeah,
I went back to it. Yeah, for what it is, exactly. I went back to it. My older brother, who's huge into the Left 4 Dead games, was like, let's go in again, and I understand the system a little bit better. I think the card gimmick was almost a little confusing to me at first. I don't know if it's just because I was trying to blast through and just shoot things. So once I take my time, I learn the mechanics, I learn the enemies, and a little bit of the characters. It all makes sense now, and now it kind of clicks where it's this guilty fun where if I'm not playing, with someone I can speak to over the mic, I will put a podcast down and I'll just kind of go through it, trying to get a couple more missions and a few achievements and stuff like that. Again, I know the story is what we were kind of lacking. There's like 3 really great cutscenes in the game that really show off. I do think some of the later characters you unlock are a little bit better than the starting characters. I think they should have balanced it a little bit better, so the first 4 were a little bit more balanced to the later 4 that you get. But it's a fun game, and now I'm at that point where it's like, you know what? Even in a world that this wasn't on Game Pass, I may have purchased this, and I feel like it would have been well worth the money. Again, playing it on Game Pass, so that makes obviously my feelings slightly askew. But it's been a fun sort of throwback to me in playing Back 4 Blood. And the last game I've been dabbling in, just because I've been playing this actually for a few weeks. I just always forget to mention it, and I'm completely missing the title. It's the Vampire Battle Royale that came out. I know we talked about
the Masquerade, Vampire the Masquerade.
I'm trying to get the exact name right now. I thought I had it loaded up. So, Vampire the Masquerade Blood Hunt.
Okay, Blood Hunt.
There we go. Which Yeah, I've been playing this actually for a while. It's in early access on Steam, so I think we saw it at one of the conferences. I don't remember exactly where. I think I think one of the PlayStation conferences showed it, where we both said the same. Where like controls look kind of fun, and the moment to moment looks kind of fun, but it's just a battle royale, and that hasn't changed much. The game is, again, it's in early access, so I'm not gonna like harp on the technical aspect of it. The gameplay is really interesting though, and I wish we could just lift the control system to a different game and play it, because I don't care for this battle royale mode right now. I think the game actually has a pretty interesting art style. It's super dark, obviously everything playing at night, gothic, running around this city with vampires. It's really cool because there are civilians that you have to take their blood, and the different mechanics with the weapons and the armor, and you get to somewhat customize your character. It is fun. The moment to moment is fun. I just wish it was elsewhere, where I wasn't hunting down I think it's like 50 other vampires in the city, because the traversing of it is really cool. Running up and down the buildings remind me almost of a sort of prototype game, a more tightened prototype control system. And there's fun to be had, but it's just like I wish I was doing it to something else than a battle royale just to last. And I won one match, so it's not that I'm terrible at it. I just don't see it. I don't see like all this to get a fancier leather jacket and a few other abilities. It doesn't really do it for me. So I did want to mention that, because it is something that I do maybe once or twice a week. I'll have a cup of coffee and I'll do a round or two, because there's something to like there. There is some good there. I'm interested to see where this game goes, especially when it's a little bit more available to people. I assume it's coming to early access on the systems as well. And once that gets picked up, I hopefully assume some more modes and stuff will come to it. But we'll have to see on that aspect. So that's all I've been really playing. Again, I want to say 90% of my time I've been playing Guardians of the Galaxy. You can't recommend that game enough. It's really great, in my opinion. So that's all I've been playing. Jabro, let's go. 2 weeks. What you been playing?
Yeah, so I'm just putting a note for myself. I'm gonna check out Guardians. It's gonna be a little tough to fit it in because Forza and GTA come out next week, but I'll try to find a point to play that, because I've literally just been waiting on your thoughts, because I can watch all the reviews in the world, but my taste, and based on what you described, it seems like I dig it a lot. So I'll check that out.
100% recommend it, especially for you.
Yeah, definitely checking it out. Okay, so for me, I'll start with Metroid, since I beat that pretty much maybe an hour after we recorded last time. I just sat down in bed, and while the video was rendering, I kind of just played it, and I won't get into specifics of where I was at, because that's still spoilers for people, and I don't think you may have made it there yet. But I was on a final boss, and I was having some difficulty with it. But again, with Metroid Dread, it's not that... Yes, things are demanding and difficult, but I think a lot of it just has to do with just figuring out and being able to perform. And just getting those rhythms down. And so once you get the rhythms down, if you go back to to any of those battles, they're pretty... I wouldn't say easy, but manageable. Because, again, I think Metroid Dread is tough. I've heard a lot of people talking about how tough it is. I think the difficulty is a little overstated at times with the way that people talk about it. For me, personally, the times that I died the most were running from those EMMI or ME robots. That's where I probably died the most. Just figuring out what turn to take and I'm like, ran into a dead end, dead here. And thankfully, the reload from that point on is pretty fast. But... so I beat it. I didn't have that much to go. I think maybe I had, from where I was at, less than 30 minutes for sure. Just what a phenomenal ending, and just the story of it is really, really dope. So for anybody who's played, Metroid, Super Metroid, Fusion, Samus Returns, all those, this is just a perfect kind of like a climax and end to the saga that has been started with those games, because there is a linear storyline between those, as much as they may feel disconnected as times. This one really does bring them all together in such a genius way that I love so much. And the moment that you beat it, it unlocks the hard mode, so I immediately jumped into that to give that a swing, and I'm actually finding it fairly manageable. I think the enemies take a little bit more damage to beat. And I would imagine some of the boss battles might be a little tougher, but for the most part, I'm making it through it pretty well, because of just the learning curve that the first run takes, by the time you restart it, you have all the tools in your hands. Yeah, they take a little bit more damage, but for the most part, if you get your parries right, you'll be able to kill anything pretty fast anyway. So, yeah, Metroid Dread hard mode, not that difficult. I'm having a good time with it, and so I'm still running through that. Last week I mentioned I was playing GTA 4, beat GTA 4, then I jumped into Baldur's Gate Tony, beat that, and then I jumped into Lost and Damned, and I also beat that too. So yeah, I've ran through everything GTA 4 for the most part has to offer. I had been meaning to play GTA 4 for a long time. It had been years since I really even touched it, and the problem was I knew that the GTA trilogy rumors were probably going to be true, and then they turned out to be, and that was going to come out next week. And I knew that by March, the GTA 5 remake was going to come out. So I was like, you know what, I'll be all GTA'd out by next year. So I was like, if I want to get through this, I need to get through it now. So I went through it, and yeah, the games hold up phenomenally. Yeah, sometimes the controls can be a little clunky. The reliance on helicopter missions drive me nuts. I hate it, especially Baldur's Gate Tony has so many helicopter related missions that are really, really annoying. So that's why I suggest, and for anybody who hasn't played GTA, cheats for some of those DLC moments are something you should probably consider. And they don't have invincibility cheats, but just being able to refill your health and ammo whenever you need it, I find it to make things a lot more manageable, because there's points in some of those DLCs where I'm like, holy crap, like I could only imagine trying to do this regular. And I did beat a lot of the missions regular, but every once in a while I'd fire up that cheat, because it's like, I'm not trying to sit here for hours trying to beat this. Yep. But yeah, no, they're phenomenal. Sometimes you forget like how that humor was back then, where it's like, holy crap, I can't believe you just said that, because some of the humor in those are, I mean, insensitive is kind of an understatement, and I mean, anybody who's played GTA 5 knows that necessarily hasn't changed a lot, but some of the, let's just say, words they use are very interesting to go back to, considering that was 2008, so we're 13 years from then. And all the DLCs hold up really, really well. Personally, I was surprised at how well the story of Lost and the Damned surpassed, in my opinion, a lot of the other stuff that GTA 4 had to offer. In my opinion, personally, I like Nico a lot. I also probably connect with Luis Lopez probably the most. So Baldur's Gate Tony, I think, is the most fun, especially with the club mechanics. But I think there's something about the writing and seriousness and kind of just relationships of Lost and the Damned that I think not only contextualize a lot of characters that you're super familiar with at that point, like Brucey and stuff like that, but on top of that, I think it has a weight to it that makes you really care about the story, not just the characters, in a way that I think is really unique to that. So I want to give a shout out to GTA 4 and all of its DLCs, because I mean, there's not many games that I think the core game is that good, and then 2 standalone story DLCs also hold up that well as well. So super impressive. Mm-hmm. I've also been playing Backbone. It's a newer game on Game Pass, and I had saw it for a couple days, but I didn't install it and give it a shot just because I was like, it looks perfect. Like, it's like a super highly densely pixelized, I would imagine kind of a neo-noir 1930s, 1940s New York, highly pixelized Octopath Traveler 3D mix-in kind of look to it. That's how it looks. So it's beautiful. But I was like, okay, it's like a detective game. I don't know if I'm trying to play that right now. It's not really like an action game per se. But I was like, my girlfriend actually, Alyssa, she suggested, she's like, what, just go for it, just download it. And I was like, all right, fine. So I downloaded it, and oh my god, this game is so good. Holy crap. I wish I started playing it a couple days sooner, to be honest, so I can really focus on it before these other games come out. But yeah, no, the game is phenomenal. Basically, you walk through the streets, you're a private investigator, you get different cases, you talk to people all around the map, they give you little tidbits of information depending on your conversational prompts. Conversation can go good, they can go bad. They have different paths that you can take, so just in case you mess up one path, you can talk to somebody else and maybe get another piece of information. So for example, like, you need to infiltrate this club, you can go through the front, and there's a way that I was able to do that. Got kicked out of the club, had to find a way back in, couldn't go through the side entrance because of certain conversational prompts that I didn't mess up necessarily, but that's just a path I didn't take. But there's another way through the roof. So that's the kind of like variability that is just really crazy impressive. So I can't recommend Backbone enough for anybody who's really into anything mystery, detective. If you're a sucker for like pixel art, if you love a good brooding story, I like it. And it's heavy too, because it's interesting. It gives me that kind of Beastars vibe where like every character's an animal, but it is in no way like a kid's property. Where there's like drugs in this world and weapons and killings and crime and cops and all that kind of stuff, but just you happen to be like a raccoon and you're doing a case for people who are sloths and stuff like that. And it's interesting because they play into the discriminatory aspect as well, where like, you're a raccoon and this is a dog bar and they don't really like your kind in there, so you need to find a way to navigate that world. But it's really dope. It's on Game Pass for anybody who's looking for something complimentary to play. I don't know if it's a game that I would suggest, being your main game for right now, unless you're super into that type of game. But I think it's a great complimentary game. It's beautiful and very well written, and it's on Game Pass, so you don't have to pay for anything if you have Game Pass. So highly recommend that. I'm moving along. Been dabbling a lot with the Switch Online, so I can get kind of familiar with what that has to offer. And so I'll kind of give you my thoughts quickly on that. Updated now that, I'm like closer to 2 to 3 weeks in. So for Genesis, no complaints. I mean, it's Genesis, really good emulation. We've actually seen this emulation before, and especially if you have the Genesis collection on Switch, these are not any new properties to you. I played pretty much, I think, every one of these, maybe with small exception of one or two. And they're all great, solid games. I'm a sucker for Genesis. I know you are as well. We both love that game. That's Absolutely. My personal game of that generation. Like when I want to play 16-bit, I'm going to the Genesis. That's just my personal favorite. So a lot of these games you can't go wrong with. Some of the choices are a little strange, like why they just went straight for Sonic 2. I don't know. I don't know. I like it though. Shinobi 3's on there. You can't go wrong with Shinobi. It looks great on Switch, especially with the OLED screen. So no major complaints there. The N64 emulations, it's pretty rough. There are some games where I don't really notice it as bad, to be honest. Mario Kart seems to run just fine. It's really when you're playing Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time that it really kind of stands out, where it's some of that input delay. Obviously, if you have the Mario 3D All-Stars, you have no real reason to play Mario 64 through that. But I wanted to try it out, and I was actually really surprised because, Nintendo, though I have a lot of problems with Nintendo, the quality of their releases in terms of a performance perspective has never really been an issue for me, with small exception. And those times I remember when, Hyrule Warriors on 3DS came out, and that was running too rough. So we remember the moments where Nintendo really slipped on performance, but I never actually would have guessed that, N64 games on Switch would have came out in this state personally, because I know Nintendo holds a high bar, especially for their first party IP. So I was actually really surprised about that, and hopefully they can rectify that soon. But overall, Yoshi's Island, still great fun time. I love playing all these games on Switch. I would like to see what the first month's releases are, and depending on those releases, I'm leaning towards canceling the service right now, personally. Wow. The $30 increase for what they're giving is just not currently there, and unless there's like a massive increase in quality, if they're able to drop, Majora's and GoldenEye in quick succession and stuff like that, and they're really putting a concerted effort to put out a lot of these games in pretty fast succession, that can hold it for me. But to be honest, the only thing I'm super, super enjoying about it right now is one or two N64 games that I wasn't really familiar with beforehand. And the Genesis games, and obviously the Genesis games, most of them I have on cart, and the ones I don't have on cart, I have the Genesis Mini, so I don't really... Yeah. I don't have any need for that. And $30, it's $50 service right now that it's just, I don't think is worth it. And if I can get that, pretty much most of what they have to offer of worth for, half the price, because it's all the NES stuff and Super Nintendo stuff are locked to the regular SKU, I'll probably just go back to that, to be honest with you. I gave it a shot, but I'll keep you posted on that. And then I'll just end off with Animal Crossing. So I've gone fully back to Animal Crossing. I actually went back probably a little bit after we recorded last week, just to get ready for the major drop. I wanted to have my town ready, so I picked all my weeds and sold a whole bunch of fruit to get a little bit of money. But I have a lot of money in the bank, so that was no big deal. And yeah, just wanted to clean up my town and get it ready. I got Brewster, and yeah, I've just been having a lot of fun with it. I love the Harv's Island, adding the little vendor mechanic that they put in. So basically, all the people who kind of float in and out of your town can have a fixed location finally. I think that's a new feature they add. I haven't played in a while, so that's new, right?
Yeah, that little aisle where they can all be. Yeah, that's part of the 2.0.
Great. So yeah, that's probably my favorite feature currently, because that gives a fixed location to all those guys. And there is a limitation. You can only, so basically to get them on your island, you need to talk to Harv on the island, donate 100,000 per person, and then you can only do it one a day. So I'm working on that. It'll take about a week to do, because I think there's 7 vendors that can come. And one of them was the first one I did, was the art guy. I forget his name, but he's the sketchy art dude.
Red?
Yeah, Red. He was the first one I did, and that was one of the biggest complaints I had when they added him to the game, which is he comes so infrequently that the pace at which you can do to fill your museum would take forever. Like, I don't even know how long it would take. And so thankfully, with him having a fixed location, that just makes that a lot easier, where I just go to Harv's Island, find which one's not a fake, and then get it the next day, donate it. And so I've already added 3 or 4 pieces of art since he came, which has been great. And yeah, so I'm liking that mechanic quite a bit. All in all, yeah, it'll take about 700,000 to get everybody on there. So that, be mindful of the amount of money that'll cost. Thankfully, back in the day, I used to play a lot with the turnip trade, so I have like 20 mil or something like that in the bank. So that's no big problem for me. But yeah, having a good time with Animal Crossing, and it's pretty much overall. Yeah, you go to Brewster, you have a cup of coffee, which I'm a sucker for. So. But other than that, if you know Animal Crossing, it's pretty much what you'd expect. I have not dabbled with the happy home designer aspect of it, so I can't comment on that one yet. I will get to that at some point, but I haven't done that yet personally. But yeah, that's everything I've been playing.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was glad to hear that, because I have not checked the Nintendo Switch expansion pack. I've not renewed it, or I haven't renewed my normal membership, and then I have not obviously got the expansion pack either. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on that. And I've been preparing for Animal Crossing. I also jumped in right before the 2.0 patch to fix a few things, and then update it. And I just haven't launched it because I know it's gonna suck me in, where I'm gonna be there for an hour. Because one of the reasons I did stop playing was because I ran out of possible ramps and stairs that I wanted to, which they increased by 2, I think, which is the 2 I always needed. So I know it's gonna take me some time. So I am planning on dabbling on that. I just really haven't had the gusto to go do it. So but I'm surprised that you were able to go jump in, and now I know, because I didn't know how to get the aisle and stuff like that. And I'm also glad I was gonna completely restart, and apparently to get the full access to some of this stuff, you need to have your island ranking at least a 3. And I'm at full rank, so I'm glad I didn't do it. Yeah, cool. From my understanding, you need to be at least a 3 to get access to all of the new features. So
yeah. Ordinances are cool too. I don't know if you know anything about that, but you can pass town ordinances now, where one of them is people plant more flowers and pick the weeds more and just make your island more beautiful. So that's another cool mechanic they added.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting back in.
Yeah, and I would say for anybody who's kind of on the fence with all the expansion pack and Animal Crossing, if you're an Animal Crossing fan that are going to get a number of hours based on all the new DLC stuff, then I think the expansion pass pays for itself pretty much. The $25 that the DLC would otherwise cost. If you're going to get tons of hours out of that new content, then yeah, I think the expansion pass is worth getting, because that'll give that to you and more. But otherwise, I was speaking kind of purely to the perspective of, I dabble in Animal Crossing, but I'm playing the N64 games for the N64 games and the Genesis and stuff like that, and that is a tougher sell for me personally, because again, I have access to so much of that. A lot of those games I have on cart as well. So if they can fix the emulation, if they can drop some more games, I could see holding on to it. But for right now, I'm leaning towards getting rid of it, just because I don't see getting a tremendous more amount of use out of it personally. All right, so I guess we can move on to the first story. And a state of play happened, and this one was a lot more low-key than a lot of the other ones, and we can kind of comment on the quality of the state of play after we go over pretty much everything that was announced. So we'll just go point by point, and I'll ask you what your thoughts are on it, if you have any thoughts. First one, Star Ocean, the Divine Force. That's kind of the bigger one that they kind of showed off and opened with. I'm a big fan of Star Ocean from PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2, maybe a little PSP days. It's been a very long time since I've dabbled with anything related to Star Ocean. So, it looks pretty good. I don't know if I'm going to get it or not, but did you have any thoughts about this?
I was excited to see it back. I also did like a lot of like the older Star Oceans, and it's always one of those franchises where it's like they'll release a game and I won't really hear that they released a version or a port or something like that. So I'd be happy to hopefully get back into it. But again, I know it's sometime in 2022. 2022 is shaping up to be a very stuffed year. So it really depends, who, what, when, where this comes out. But I was excited to see it back because I do know I have one friend who just is Star Ocean, like that's his games.
Oh wow! Okay.
So I was happy for him. I was I shot him. I haven't talked to him in a little bit, but I shot him a text and I was like, yeah, for you. But it's cool. I think it did look good. It did just kind of look like Star Ocean, from what I remember. But it's interesting to see it back.
Yeah, for sure. It was one of those tricky ones because, like, when I watch a lot of these conferences, and I don't know when we would watch conferences, if you remember, but we always like to like guess, like, while it's going, like, oh, which one is that? This or is this?
Yeah.
And I the first thought I had was, it kind of reminds me of Star Ocean, but I was like, no, because Star Ocean is not that it's a dead IP, but like it doesn't have the pull anymore because it's been out of commission for a long time.
Yeah.
And then it turned out to be Star Ocean. I was like, oh, no way. Look at you heading up a state of play. Good for you. But, yeah, not bad. We got Bug Snacks, the Isle of Big Snacks. So this is kind of a DLC to Bug Snacks. I thought Bug Snacks was actually pretty decent, but this is definitely not something for me personally. How about you?
I played 45 minutes of Bug Snacks, and that was enough for me.
Yeah, for me.
I see the charm of the game. I see why people really like the game. It's just it wasn't a game for me. I didn't like the whole pick a tomato, throw it here so someone can come lick it and you can catch it in the net. I understand why people like it, and it's cool that they're doing free update and stuff like that. So that's cool for people who liked it. I kind of just I looked at it and I was like, okay.
Yeah, and then we got Deathverse Let It Die. This is a kind of multiplayer action game that looks like you're, I think, on like a game show or something like that. Looked cool. I was having trouble when it was going on. I was like, is this like an IP that exists? Because it looked like strangely familiar at the same time while they were showing it. But yeah, it looks pretty cool. Definitely not for me, but I could see they're gonna have some tough competition. It's a very saturated market right now, so I'm curious to see how it does once it comes out. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, so I don't know if you maybe didn't realize. So it's a somewhat follow-up to Let It Die, which was a PS4.
Oh, you see, I thought it was. I thought I saw something like that.
Exactly. So there's a game called Let It Die, which that released, I want to say, in 2016, which was a online multiplayer action game where you had to climb a tower with a bunch of floors. You like started in your boxers or something, and it was like super clunky. So that's interesting because I was also super confused what was going on because I was like, because the way they rephrased it as Deathverse Let It Die, I was like, what is going on? So it looks a slightly more story driven, but it's funny on how much they didn't want to say it was a follow-up sequel or whatever next to mine,
successor or something,
or like and I think it's a lot to do with like who developed it and thing like that. This one's being by Gung Ho. So that's why it may seem so familiar to you because I think I want to say maybe I showed you it one time.
Yeah,
but it was like
for sure.
super clunky and it was never really my type of game, which is funny because it was almost like a tower battle royale before battle royales really hit it. So I'm interested to see what goes on with this. It's just that's not an IP that really spoke to me or a game that even spoke to me.
Yeah, that just blew my mind. I just looked it up and I was like, oh, this is exactly what I had in mind. And I was like, I know this from somewhere. I was like, I've seen something closely related to this. So that makes all the sense in the world. Next one up, we got We Are OFK. This is kind of like an indie game where you play as a band and you kind of just experience the story of that band. looks pretty cool. There's always I'm kind of a sucker sometimes for those kind of like indie artsy music games. So I have my eye on it. I don't know if I'm gonna jump all the way in it, but I love seeing games like this at State of Plays, and I feel terrible sometimes because people are like, "Where's God of War? What is this?" And I'm like. So I feel bad sometimes they get like a bad rap, but I thought it looked pretty cool. I would like to see a little bit more gameplay to see, and what the release strategy is for this. If this was like on a Game Pass, for example, obviously I'm jumping into it, but I'll throw them, 15, 20 if the game's really solid. What did you think?
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I know they kind of did it on purpose because like the game, like that trailer started with like war sucks, and I was like. Because when you hear that war never changes, we all know from Fallout. So there's like a weird distinct to me where I'm like, is this some sort of... I didn't even really understand. And the trailer we saw was interesting. The art style is kind of cool. And the way they talk about it, where they're like, oh, it's going to be 5 parts of interactive music videos. So I'm more interested to see what it works out. It does look like something I would love to check out at some point, depending on when it launches. But, it all comes down to what are the reviews really saying? What's the price range for this? But I thought it looked pretty interesting. It almost looks like something I'd rather watch than actually play through. But these interactive albums and the stuff that like Sony's doing with partnership with bands. Because there was another band that announced something with that, which I forgot was like
the Radiohead one.
Was it the Radiohead one? Yeah.
Yeah, so, Kid Amnesia. Yeah.
With Kid Amnesia. So I'm all for these kind of new experiences. So I was happy to see this. I thought it was pretty cool.
And we got King of Fighters 15. I've dabbled in King of Fighters for many years now, but this is just not my personal franchise. And I feel like I feel bad for saying this. Like I feel like there's one of these like all the time coming out, but no, not for me. What do you think? You're the fighting guy, so.
I like King of Fighters. It is one of the more stiff, old school ones where Tekken, Street Fighter, all these other games have learned to adapt to a new style. They want to keep that super stiff feel of it. Like if you just keep hitting square, all you can do is like hard punch and that's it. I think I'm a little worried about this game, just because of the constant delays, and they're doing like weird beta testing instead of just releasing a demo. They're doing like 3 different beta days or testing where you play as a different character every day, and it's fine. But I think I do worry more about where that game is, and I feel like if this game doesn't succeed, it'll probably be the end of King of Fighters. Which may not be the worst thing. We are 15 titles. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. They got 15, so I think they had a good run.
But I saw it, and I know they announced a new character, and I was like, this is not one of those fighting games I get day one.
We got Little Devil Inside, which is kind of a, I guess, supernatural, paranormal exploration indie game. Look pretty solid. I wasn't blown away by this one personally. It doesn't really look like my cup of tea. Did you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I saw it and I was confused because I couldn't remember if we've seen it before. And we have seen this before.
Okay.
The Little Devil Inside. I want to say, at least I'm actually looking at the trailer again right now, and I feel like we saw this at some point. But again, it's just one of those weird things where it's like no sort of date or sort of push on it, so just kind of putting it there just to put it there is always weird for me.
Yeah.
Because the game is coming to like everything. From last I remember, it's coming to Xbox, Switch, and the family of PlayStation. So, okay. But I thought it was cool that it was here again. I do think it's time to either stop showing it until it's ready or discuss a little bit more what the game actually is.
Got it. We got First Class Trouble, which is kind of like a social mystery Among Us type game. I was actually really interested in kind of just the style of the game. So actually, I'm digging what they showed us for First Class Trouble. This is something I'm interested in. This one also looks like it's a little bit reliant on having some people to play with. That would probably make it more of a fun experience. Did you have any interest in First Class Trouble?
I mean, yeah, that's. I looked at it and I was like, all right, it's for lack of a better term, like 3D Among Us. I did like the animation style, and this is one of those games where it's this game is Is it out already, right? Because it's going to be a PS Plus game. I don't remember if it was
I don't know if it's
month.
out already quite yet, but I could look that up.
Yeah, but because I want to say I even think I looked at this when I just signed into my PS Plus yesterday to redeem all my games, and if someone tells me to download it and play it on and it's free on PS Plus, I will for sure check it out at least. But besides that, not the most interesting.
Yeah, I think it's out.
Oh yeah, actually, First Class is out November 2nd for both PS4 and PS5. It is a free PS Plus game for November, so I may check it out this month at some point, as long as someone tells me, "Hey, I downloaded it," then I'll download it as well.
Yeah, I might guinea pig it for you, so I'll let you know if it's trash.
Yeah, we'll see.
We got Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. This is not the first time they've shown this. We just got more of a look at it. I mean, like, on one hand, I'm like, okay, it's cool that, like, Five Nights has, like, taken that step forward into kind of, like, a little bit of an exploratory open game that's pretty cool. There's some cool stuff. This world is just really not my thing. I couldn't even get into the old ones, really. I was so fascinated by the lore of it, but the actual games themselves, just not my world, never has been my world. So I'm happy for them being able to make that jump, but I'm probably never touching this game. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I was a huge fan of the series when it first came out. I liked the idea of it. I liked the sort of narrative we had. The game's obviously, money talks, so he started making tons of different versions, and the stories don't really matter, and timelines. The game looks interesting as, like, a sort of, like you're saying, walking around the place. Looks kind of cool and exploring, and there's probably tons of Easter eggs. I know they said there's, like, a lot of... Yeah, there's, like, mini arcade, because, like, the Five Nights have always had these sort of mini games to play, and those are going to be hidden throughout there. I'm so far gone from the lore that most of these characters, I don't know if these characters are animatronics, I don't know if they're new, not new. I saw at one point you climb into one in the trailer, and then you were, like, controlling one of them, which, again, I was like, all right, okay, in a world where I get back into Five Nights at Freddy, maybe I'd like to check it out, but that's not too far out. I think it's like December, so.
Yeah, for sure. We have Death's Door, which reminds me kind of quick action, roguelike looking type game. I really love the art style of this one. So I'm intrigued by this one. This is definitely one I'd probably want to play on Switch, if anything. Any interest in Death's Door?
Yeah, so I actually really do have a big interest. I'd like, this is by Acid Nerve. I liked their previous game, Titan Souls, which was that boss rush game. It came out a while ago, and Death's Door's it released on Xbox and PC, but it's just one of those games where, like, when I saw it, I was like, yeah, I'll wait for that. And they announced pretty quickly that it was gonna come to other platforms, so I'm excited to finally play it on Switch. I think it's at the end of the month, right before Thanksgiving break, so awesome. Maybe that lines up perfectly. The few people I heard who played this on Xbox, and I have one person who I know who played it on PC, loves the game. So I'm excited to finally check it out, in the state I want to be in.
Yeah, it looks dope. And then I guess we can kind of finish off for this story with Kart Racer, Kart Rider Drift. So this one, Kart Racers are tough for me because, again, it's competitive, and I have, like, very high standards when it comes to kart racer. This is an old genre; it's been around for a while, and we've seen. For me, the 1 and 2 for me personally are obviously Mario Kart and CTR. So if you can't touch them, then you're in rough shape. But I mean, what they showed looked fine. Funnily enough, is when I saw the trailer for this, and sorry to Kart Rider Drift, but when I was watching this, I was like, oh, this just makes me want to play. You remember Mod Nation Racer?
Yep.
It reminded me of, like, wanting that again. But yeah, Kart Rider Drift looks fine. I wasn't blown away by anything. It's tough because it's like everything. The Mario Kart really kind of defined the genre, and then CTR, I feel like, came in and threw their spin on it. And so for now, unless you're doing something insanely transformative, it's gonna look like many things we've seen before, whether it be the Sonic Kart Racer or the Strawberry Shortcake Kart Racer or Garfield Kart Racer. Like everybody's got one. So what did you think about this?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm a big kart racing guy. I do like, big fan of Mario Kart. We spent many hours playing Mario Kart. CTR I really liked as well, especially the remake of CTR. Unfortunately, I don't think we're ever getting another one.
Unfortunately,
and Mod Nation, Yeah, and Mod Nation Racer, I'd also like to put pretty high up there. I thought, especially the original PS3 version, not the Vita, or the I think PSP. I was like,
PSP had one too. That was fine.
Yeah, those were a little bit less lackluster, but I think the create play share version of Mod Nation was really well. And this had so many vibes of it, because like the art style is what you would think like a new Mod Nation would look like.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if I'm gonna check it out. I gotta just not craving to be back in here. I know there's like a beta going live, but they're showing these characters, and I know this is apparently a popular IP in like South Asia or Southeast Asia, as Crazy Racing Kart Rider. And this one's Kart Rider Drift. So I know this is like an IP elsewhere. I just don't know if it'll be able to make that jump into this new, into over here and be completely playable, because this is not I don't see anywhere on here. Is it this is not it is a free to play, so I guess there's no entry. That starts as soon as I see free to play, I start worrying about monetization. I see how easily a kart racer could be. We had this issue with CTR where Activision said no microtransactions. 3 months later, they filled it with microtransactions. So I guess it really just depends. I probably will download it at least once to just check it out, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And yes, that was it for the state of play in general. I thought it was kind of just quick. I think we definitely could have waited, or I can see why they were like so quick to announce and quickly show it. Sometimes there's a little bit more time between it. I don't know why everyone's expectations were so high. I don't know why people thought we'd see like God of War again.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty clear what we were getting from the state of play. All in all, it could have been a whole lot quicker. I would have done I think they need a new term for like maybe a 15-minute sort of trailer back-to-back thing instead of calling it a state of play, because I guess just people it's the same with Nintendo Directs. People hear Nintendo Directs and the first thing everybody would comment is the next Smash release, which is finally over. But although I thought it was an okay state of play, nothing super jumping out of your chair excited.
Yeah, it's that was my biggest issue with it. Is like I don't mind the variability in what a state of play can be. I just feel like it might be advantageous for not only Sony but also the teams showing off their games. For them to have like maybe a different phrasing for like a state of play - indie showcase or something like that to temper expectations, because again I feel terrible sometimes where I see these kind of really negative reactions because of what this state of play is not, and what people wanted it to be. And I think of a lot of these teams where like this was their time to shine. They finally get to show off their game that they worked for. A lot of these teams are not massive teams, so they're not churning out games every once in a while, and then people have a negative reaction, not because of what your game is, but just again because what it's not. And that kind of sucks from their regard. So I really do hope that like people can temper their own expectations and just look at these games for what they are. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. But like, let's not trash it because they're not Sony Santa Monica. You know what I mean? Like, I felt bad because I would go to the comment sections and I'm watching in real time and they're like, oh, what's this indie trash, blah 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 blah. And it's like, and then part of me is like, okay, everybody can have their opinions, but at the same time, I'm like, part of me blames this on Sony because it's like, they don't tell you what this is, and this was a decently long one too, so I could see why you're like, okay, so it's gonna be what, a 40-minute presentation with 11 or 15 games that we're going to announce. I could see why somebody's be like, oh snap, Elden Ring, you know what I mean? Like I could see why people make that jump. That's why I try my best to go in with zero expectations. So I thought it was kind of a mid state of play with some solid games, some stuff that I don't particularly care for, but it's just they need a phrasing adjustment, whether it's a state of play mini or state of play indie showcase. Or I feel like Xbox does that pretty well with they have the ID at Xbox thing, so that they don't mix it too bad. So like they don't show you off Halo and the next Forza and stuff like that, and just throw in a tiny little Devolver Digital game in there and just and then make the indie game look insane in comparison, where it's like, yikes. If you have something that's running at 4K 120 on the Series X and then you throw a little indie art game where you're walking across a beach, I could see why people would be like, what the hell is that? It's all about where you position it, and I think Nintendo's done a pretty solid job in the past with that. Xbox does a pretty solid job with that, and I think Sony just needs to play around with the format a little bit more to just help things be presented correctly.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Where I don't think anything here there was not a bad game shown here.
No.
I think just people who only want to play those big AAA busters are gonna see this and be like, oh, trash, terrible games. I'm like, no, there's a little bit for everyone here. It's just it was just different than what expected.
100%.
Mm-hmm. All right, going on to the next story. Comes from Matt Purcell at IGN. Sony has confirmed that it has invested into Devolver Digital. The official PlayStation Twitter account today posted a tweet stating, "Shout out to our friends at Devolver Digital on their public offering today. We're honored to be an investor. Keep shining on a light on those great indie games." I thought this was really cool. I didn't realize that Devolver Digital was going, public with like investors and stuff. And I'm glad that it wasn't just like smaller, times. Because I know there's a lot of like other indie developers that are teaming up and being bought up by like Chinese investors, and that gets into a whole different situation. But Devolver Digital is like high quality indie games. I don't even like referring to them as an indie developer or publisher because some of the games they have, I say, are really great. A game I talked about, I think I talked about like 2 episodes last year or whenever it was when it was Runner. I loved that game. That game was super cyberpunk over the top-down style. And I know these games like Enter the Gungeon was a huge thing. It still is. Downwell, Titan Souls. These are all games that come from Devolver Digital. So Sony not only helping fund and publish it, I think this is also going to start seeing, you'll start seeing some exclusive times and licensing, and sometimes these small investments, because I think Sony was like 5% investment. Sometimes that's all it is to get a certain game get picked up off the ground. I know like people like Hotline Miami, those games are fantastic. So I'm happy to see that. It also means that more of these games are going to keep releasing and staying on PlayStation console, where for us we play everywhere, but some of these games I do just prefer playing on Sony consoles, same way I prefer certain games playing on Xbox. But I thought this was really cool, and I thought as of right now there was no like reason to be super upset or anything like that, because it's not like it was a buyout. I'd rather have these investments and partnerships than just straight buyouts and acquisitions. So what did you think?
Yeah, and when I heard this story, I had to make sure and double check that they didn't buy Devolver Digital outright, because that would make me a little more nervous just knowing that Sony could kind of control their fate going forward. But yeah, no, an investment I think is a brilliant idea from Sony's perspective. I think this is great for Devolver Digital. They're such an incredibly talented publisher over there, such immense, just an insane catalog that they put together. I've loved so many of their games, so many diverse experiences that you go into there, and they're growing, every year to the point where they've had their own E3 conference, and you see what they do with it. So obviously they don't take the conventional road, which is what I love about them. That they know what they are, and they're willing to go for it in a way that I haven't seen many other publishers be willing to do with their brand, to just look like nutcases, like they don't mind it. And yeah, I think that's an awesome thing, and it's smart for Sony to finance that. And I also don't look at this story in a void. This is coming in conjunction with Sony obviously investing a ton into PC resources. So I think Sony is looking at the different places where they can expand or monetize in really smart ways. And yeah, and the expanding indie market that is not feeling so indie anymore, and the PC market are 2 places that I think anybody the size of Sony, Nintendo, or Xbox should be trying to dip their toes into. And so this is a very smart decision from that regard. So yeah, shout out to Devolver Digital, really happy for them. And yeah, I think it was a very smart decision for Sony as well.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think it's great. And again, I mean, there's so many of these titles that are stuck on like maybe PCs and stuff, and I know contracts are an issue with that. So I'm hoping some of that stuff carries over. Because I know like Carry On never came to PlayStation. I know it's on Switch and Xbox. It may have come to PlayStation, but I don't remember it too. Serious Sam 4 is stuck, I think, on Stadia, so hopefully they can get. I'm not a huge Serious Sam, but I remember that was a big deal. Hopefully that will come over eventually.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, it's not an acquisition, so like by no means is Devolver Digital obligated to release their games at any higher of a clip on PlayStation consoles. However, now that Sony is an investor, that means they have some degree of ownership or royalties. It would probably that's going to strengthen their relationship for sure. So if anything, that's going to just make things better for kind of everybody involved. Devolver Digital gets a little bit more cash in their pockets to play around with and invest and develop more games, and Sony's get a little bit of ownership and a little slice of that pie. So I think it's a win-win solution in that regard for sure.
Cool.
All right, next one is a big story that I feel like people have been sleeping on this story because of the subtext of the story is pretty insane. So we're going to talk about Square Enix and their kind of thoughts on Avengers. This is a story by George Yang over there at IGN. In Square Enix's annual report for 2021, President Yosuke Matsuda said that Marvel's Avengers was an ambitious games-as-a-service release. However, Avengers was not as successful as the company would have liked, which, is no surprise there. We overcame a variety of unexpected difficulties in the final phase of the game's development, including needing to transition from work to home due to the pandemic. We were able to surmount these challenges and release the game, but unfortunately it has not proven as successful as we would have liked. Matsuda said that Square Enix will learn from its experience with Avengers and work to produce games that mesh with the unique abilities and tastes of our studios and development teams. Nonetheless, taking on a games-as-a-service model highlighted issues that we are likely to face in future game development efforts, such as the need to select game designs that mesh with the unique attributes and tastes of our studios and development teams, said Matsuda. While the new challenge that we tackled with this title produced a disappointing outcome, we are certain that the games-as-a-service approach will grow in importance as gaming becomes more service-oriented. So there's a lot to tackle with this story. Obviously, it's Square Enix's feelings on Avengers on a performance level. There's their feature on is seemingly who they chose for this game, and then there's their feelings on games as a service overall. And I kind of just take it chunk by chunk. So for me personally, it's just kind of an outside. The most surprising thing was them acknowledging that, and they didn't say this outright, but the subtext of it is, it seems like they don't think Crystal Dynamics was probably the greatest choice for this game type, which is an interesting admission from somebody of the company themselves. Obviously, that is not a hot take. That's something that you and I'm sure we both kind of agree on, and probably have hinted at the past that, this was probably not the team for that game type. Personally, I don't think Avengers should have been a games as a service game in general. Personally, I think there are certain types of games, whether it be a battle royale, a racer, or whatever, that can probably lend itself better to that. Stuff like The Division, I think, isn't a great example of how to do that. But Avengers, it was a little bit of a tougher sell. I would have preferred more of kind of a fixed Spider-Man-like experience from Avengers, or even what it seems like you're describing Guardians of the Galaxy as being. I think would have been a much better fit for Avengers personally. But it's just interesting hearing them acknowledge. So obviously Avengers, we're talking about not soon after Endgame, so the cultural cachet of Avengers being at its highest pretty much, I think, in American history, to be honest, of just recognizability of what Avengers is. The fact that this game was not one of the best-selling games of that year is mind-blowing to me. So that just tells you that, they kind of fumbled the bag on that one. And for sure, to some extent, you have to give them a little bit of leeway because the pandemic stuff was tough on everybody, and people have to work from home, and you put out what you can put out, and you try the best you can for sure. But I don't know if doubling down on games as a service and just chalking it up to it's because we give it to Crystal Dynamics is necessarily the takeaway that I would have taken personally. I would have taken that maybe not every IP needs to be games as a service, and you can probably they need to find ways to monetize single player games more effectively, like everybody else has managed to do. You know what I mean? It's like, it's interesting where you have these Activisions and EAs and now Square Enix being like, oh, we got to find ways to monetize this game and make as much money because everything's shifting so hard. Yet every single year, Nintendo and Sony prove over and over again the financial viability of single player games. They do it all the time, so they act like these games don't exist. But what were your thoughts on this?
I shared very similar aspects of it. I do think it was very strange that this was an official report from someone at that company. Because yeah, we're not in the minority where I think you even said, I think we did a spoiler cast for Avengers, where we discussed where we're like, I just don't think Crystal Dynamics. It's a two-parter. One, I don't think they're the right team because I don't think games as a service is what they need to create. I also don't think Avengers needs to be games as a service.
Facts.
And that's more prominent now than ever because of Guardians. I know we're about 2 years apart from that, but the Guardians game is going to prove, and I can't wait for you to play this because I think you'll see I hope my words will play in your head sometimes in certain moments, and you'll realize like. Because that's what it's been to me, where it's like, it can be done. Yeah. It can be removed from the MCU, which I think was an issue with Marvel's Avengers, where it just was, it kind of chose a bad time, at this peak of Marvelness, the peak of Endgame. The MCU is in a sort of reboot stage in a sense, story-wise, where you choose these characters that we know and love. You chose these characters that, some of them have died in their most prominent form, and you give us like these fakers in a sense, and not to be against it, but that's not the part that we got over. I got over, not having characters look exactly like the MCU, right? That was a super minor complaint that I think we even discussed before the game launched. Is a small thing that we needed to get over, was that they didn't look like Chris Evans. They didn't look like Scarlett Johansson. And that was never our real complaints with Avengers. It was the moment-to-moment gameplay. It was the games as a service. It didn't really make sense because that core story mode, we actually praised pretty well. I wouldn't say we spoke of it. It's nowhere
not
near
blown
what,
away, but it's solid. Yeah.
Yeah. It was nowhere near what we thought of Spider-Man. It's not, it's nowhere near what I think of Guardians, and I think you will think of Guardians as well. And it's not what we have hopes for. It's Miles Morales is another aspect of it where we saw these stories with characters we know and love. You got to remember, Miles. He's been a huge. Miles Morales has been a huge part of our being super into the comics and also our culture, especially in your background, how we identify to Miles. He came off one of his biggest things was Into the Spider-Verse, and nobody complained that Spider-Man Miles Morales was a different take because it was still really well done and honored the character. And I think that's where Crystal Dynamics kind of, I don't want to use the word failed, but they failed. And that's kind of being a pattern with them because it's almost the same complaints I had with the Tomb Raider games, which were Crystal Dynamics, where it's like you lost a little bit of what made Tomb Raider, and you really just try to make this, you try to copy, in a sense, some things that were done in Uncharted. So I do think it's a mixed bag of, I think a lot of people were at fault. I don't think it was just Crystal Dynamics. They can make really good, solid games. Technically, all the Tomb Raider games, I don't remember having technical issues. The games played really great. I remember when they did the PS4 port, the game was really fantastic. Technically wise, it was just more of the background, culture, and story wise. So it's the same thing where it's just, I don't understand why, and I understand why they wanted to do games as a service, to keep these games living. I know for, it's been rumored for a fact that they wanted to sell the Wakanda expansion. They had to give it for free because of many other issues. They wanted to sell these packs. They didn't want to just give away free content. There's no way that's what they wanted to do. They did it because they had to, crowd control basically. And so I think it's all that stuff leads up to the fact that why they were so disappointed. And we were disappointed. We got that game day one. I got it by accident 2 days early. For some reason, I don't remember why, but I remember I had gotten it 2 days early. Just showed up in my mailbox. So we were there. We were there to support them, and which is why I'm okay being pretty down on it, because it's like I tried to go back when they added more content to fix some stuff, and they just started, shoving the microtransactions in there, and I just don't like that. Games as a service is quickly being, married to the idea of microtransactions, and there's other games that we're seeing do it a little bit better, like you said, The Division, and what they're doing with that. And there's other games that I haven't gotten to try yet, but Riders Republic is a good games as a service and makes sense as a games as a service.
Definitely.
Where you're adding different events and and adding different locations and weather types, and that makes sense for that. It doesn't make sense, in my opinion, for Avengers, which is why it's like I see where it could have worked. I just don't think that's the game people wanted. I don't think it's the game anyone asked for. I don't think it's the game you guys showed as well.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that there was, I wouldn't say it was robust, but there was a fully fleshed out story mode, as you mentioned earlier, shows that to some extent they understood that. It's just they didn't fully commit to it, oddly enough. And if they just focused as much effort as putting, a very compelling, well-crafted narrative, instead of just trying to find ways to supplement that experience with weird filler missions and just nonsense color swaps and DLC packs months and months and months after the game comes out. It's just, it shows that their thinking was kind of off from the jump with this, but they understood to some extent how to make this game good. You know what I mean? Like, just looking at that story mode, like, and okay, it's been out for a long time, so spoiler alert for anybody who's there. But the fact that, you go and play as Captain America in space shows that to some extent, like, they were trying to craft a very unique story, and then I think to some extent they definitely succeeded with that. But there's a lot of things off about that game, which is probably why I haven't returned to it whatsoever since I beat it. I haven't touched that game since I beat it. I have full intentions on doing that one day, perhaps with the Spider-Man stuff, maybe, I don't know, and I'll probably go back and go play Wakanda at some point. But it's just it was off from announcement, and they in some ways proved me wrong when I played the game, and I was like, you know what, that was actually a pretty solid story. I loved what they did with Kamala Khan and stuff like that. But then they eventually morphed into exactly what I thought it was going to be, and it's just not really my cup of tea. And again, that's coming from somebody who enjoys a couple games of service. I've played Fortnite. I like it. It's good. I've played Division, and that's 100% like exactly what I think they were going for. And I think the Division's great. So I think games as a service can absolutely be done, and actually be really good and not put a sour taste in your mouth. It's just, you need to understand the IP a little bit better than I think Square currently does, obviously. And I was actually a little bit surprised that they were willing to kind of throw Crystal Dynamics under the bus a little bit there. Would be like, they're the wrong team for it. And it's like, they really did kind of throw them under the bus there. And I was really surprised. And again, nothing that they said I think is necessarily incorrect. I'm just surprised to hear it coming from Square, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to almost get like the big boss be like very disappointed. And again, I wonder, and I have to keep bringing it up because basically, Eidos Montreal, I think, is also partnered with Square for Guardians. So it's just like a mix, because we saw Square kind of do this with Eidos Montreal when the second Deus Ex reboot game, I forget which one it was, Human Revolution or Mankind Divided, I forget which was the first one. When that one was announced, and then the way that released and the way the critics received it, so I remember Square also kind of being like, oh, we just think that it's the IP and the way it was handled and released. I'm like, that's stuff that comes down to you publishing it when and where, giving the certain resources, and what kind of game you're asking to be made.
Correct.
I think that's what needs to be really, adjusted. In even outside of the Marvel license, I enjoyed Final Fantasy 15, but that is not a Final Fantasy game to me, because it was this weird mix of a game where they, people complained about certain aspects, and they went in and had to patch it in a year later. Oh, we don't like that the car is so stiff. All right, now the car can drive all over and turn into a rocket ship. It's like weird, where it's like you have to. I think if there is a mix of not knowing what to do with certain aspects and titles.
Yeah,
and I think that was an issue, and I think that's an issue with Avengers, where Avengers was like, here's this mold, and make every character fit this mold, and it was awkward because characters did play very similar and then played very awkwardly. Hulk played like a brute, like he should, but then when you got Thor, he also played like a big brute, but you could also do a weird projectile with your hammer, and it just was really weird. And I hope the success of, again, we don't know sales wise or anything, but critically, I think Guardians is getting pretty good reviews all around, and I think that makes sense. But it's because you're playing as one character. If you don't play, as of now, unless it drastically changes 12 hours in, you only play as Peter Quill, and the gameplay is to fit Peter Quill. It's not giving me randomly Gamora sections that don't play correctly or play like a cheap, quick version of Peter Quill's gameplay. It's made for him. It's the same what we got, like we said, for Spider-Man. You played as Spider-Man, and look what they did in Spider-Man. The parts I didn't like about Spider-Man were when they gave me Miles and Mary Jane and those weird
Mary Jane.
stealth
I
missions.
hated it.
And I think they fixed it, because in Miles you got to do some stealth the correct way. I don't want to be Mary Jane stealthing. I want to be Spider-Man stealthing, which is why I liked having Miles Spider-Man stealth.
For sure.
So I think it's that molded. I think I'd love to be a fly on the wall and see what the original idea was, because there's no way Avengers is sort of this mixing pot of and it's just a bad soup of all these ideas that, you know, there's like these ingredients that separately could work really well, but shoving them all together doesn't really make sense. Which is why I think this is kind of what happened. It's just everyone had an idea. They would try to hit everything. Let's hit the single player, let's hit the multiplayer, let's hit the weekly events, and let's hit getting these certain characters out. And it's like, it doesn't work that way, in my opinion.
No, 100%. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Man, so I'm curious to see where this goes, because again, the game's out. If you're not gonna play it, you're not gonna play it. It sequel baits pretty hard at the end of this Avengers. So, especially going on with this, I don't know what contracts are. I wonder if Crystal Dynamics will even want to make a second one. If they are making a second one, is it already? I think it's kind of tainted at this point, unless you really remove yourself from this Avengers game. I'd be curious what Square Enix is gonna do, because they paid big bucks for that IP license, so it's such a unfortunate situation for everyone. I would love this game to have been crazy good, and once a month I would jump in and play as a character in a new stage, mission, bad guys, enemies, something. But unfortunately, that's not what they delivered.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I know Square is 100% foraying back into a Marvel property. I just don't think it's gonna look the same, and I would be really surprised if it comes from Crystal Dynamics, to be honest. I just don't think they're gonna put them on that assignment anymore. What they put them on, I have no clue, but it's just obvious from the way they're thinking that in some ways they seem to blame that matchup in less than just the logical thinking from management of even pairing those two things together.
Yeah, we'll have to see. And I wonder. I just wonder if other drama will come of this, because we are reaching the point where Avengers is almost over. I know they keep touting more, games, but like the player count is through the floor. Yeah, it's dwindled. It's spiked for the Wakanda the story pack, but then dropped completely.
Well, maybe Spider-Man will breathe a little bit of life, but that's PlayStation only, so that's a little bit tough too.
Yeah, and it's like it's not. It's more like, I know you never went back to it, but I played the Hawkeye release.
Okay.
And that's like 4 or 5 missions, and that's it. That's all it really is. Wakanda was different. Wakanda was like an expansion where you go to Wakanda.
Yeah.
This, I don't know what it's gonna be. To what extent is Spider-Man? I also don't see how Spider-Man, like we were just talking about the mold. I don't know how Spider-Man fits in that mold.
Is he gonna be like web slinging? Like, are they gonna add New York into the game? Like, I don't really know much about Avengers post the story mode. So.
They have not shown Spider-Man. We don't know what he looks like. They have not shown gameplay. Because as Hawkeye, you do get a sort of swinging thing you could do off certain light posts, and it's super clunky. So I can only imagine Spider-Man's gonna look terrible if that's what he's got. But we'll see, because I will probably jump in for that. I have not played the Wakanda expansion either, so maybe I'll do Wakanda, Spider-Man, delete it, and I'll be good forever.
Yeah, that's what I'm planning on doing right now. Just letting it pool all the stuff that I'm interested in, banging it out in, 5-10 hours, and then deleting it back off my system. So.
Forever. All right. The last story is a follow-up with something we've been watching for a while. We've been kind of interested to see. Netflix gaming service now available in the U.S. So Netflix announced that it has expanded its gaming service to over 190 countries, including the United States and Canada. However, the gaming feature will still require subscribers to own either an Android smartphone or tablet to play. Netflix games will start rolling out to Netflix mobile app starting November 3rd. Users can also download Netflix game as an app through the Google Play Store. Among the games including in the service is Stranger Things 3 the game. Unfortunately, you will not be able to use a wireless controller or a mobile controller like the Razer devices, as the games on the Netflix Games apps uses touch controls only when playing in the Netflix app. Netflix notes that its games apps requires a subscription to its streaming service, and that there are no ads, additional fees, or microtransactions. While iOS support is not available yet, Netflix will say it will roll out in the upcoming months. So this has been a pretty interesting thing. We've known for a while Netflix is jumping into the sort of streaming service, including games and stuff. And I know right now they've only been really pushing the Stranger Things, because I know it's like Stranger Things 3 the game, and then Stranger Things 1987 the game.
Yep.
And very few other things that they've put on there. But I was wondering what you think of this, because I know we've been talking about it, but I don't know if you've been able to go hands-on or not with it.
Yeah, no, not hands-on quite yet. I think one of the biggest... Well, it's obviously a really interesting thing, as we kind of spoke about last time this subject came up. I think one thing, they need to fix that controller support thing. Touch only is not it, personally, in my opinion. I love connect. I have at my desk an extra Xbox controller that I use strictly for when I play things like on mobile, because sometimes I'll dabble with Project xCloud and stuff like that. And so, and I believe also like stuff like Apple Arcade allows for that as well. So having that controller being able to sync up to your phone is like super critical because I'm not sitting there playing. Like, shout out to all the kids on your pads playing your touch controls. I can't do that kind of stuff. It's just call me a boomer if you'd like, but I need my tactile buttons. And so for now, I'm kind of waiting. That's the one thing I'm waiting on, is just for them to add controller support so I can just kind of play that way, because I don't like playing things on my phone like that. But and I'm intrigued by it. They don't have a lot on there. It seems like they're very much dedicated right now, at least, to their own created games, which I respect but don't see as sustainable really, until someone's willing to play ball with them. They're going to be in the short term, kind of in a worse place than Stadia. You need to foster those relationships, and I don't think that Netflix themselves are putting out games at a fast enough clip to support a streaming service necessarily. So hopefully they can rectify that and get a little bit more stuff on there. But I'm very intrigued by it. I like when I see new players coming into the space, even if I don't think it's going to work very well. Having another, company in there throwing in, I'm curious to see. Netflix is obviously also approaching a similar thing to the gaming that they have with the show, with like kind of original content instead of leasing out other content. And that's kind of what they've done on the media side. So I would imagine their strategy with video games would be a very similar thing. So it'd be IP they own, and they're going to create their own games for it on their own service. So I can respect the insularity of it. I just don't know if it's going to work long term, but I would like to get my hands on it, ideally by next episode we do, just because I do have an Android phone, so I currently qualify for it. So I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, I'm actually attempting to check it out right now while we're recording, and so it's weird. In the Netflix app, there is nothing there. They also said that they're releasing a Netflix gaming app. That's not exactly true. You can download the Stranger Things 3 the game by Netflix, and it asks you to sign into your Netflix account. But besides that, I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's just a 8-bit, or it's like a 16-bit touch and go game. So yeah, it's streaming fine. Again, I'm here on my Wi-Fi, not on my cellular device. I gotta try that out when I'm not connected to my Wi-Fi. What does it really look like over cellular data?
Yeah.
Because xCloud does a pretty good job, but it's not the perfect job depending what kind of game you're playing. So that's interesting to see. But it's like, what else is gonna serve? Are you gonna just keep doing these sort of 16-bit tie-in games, which is fine because it's not coming at an additional cost. It'd be nice to have it all in one app. I don't know if they're going to release specifically a Netflix game app, or will they incorporate it to the Netflix app we have now. But yeah, the big one is that controller support, because some people, I not all the time, but in my lunch bag, I usually carry either a DualShock 4 with me or a Xbox controller, because I can sync them Bluetooth to my phone and play xCloud occasionally. So it's interesting that that's not available quickly, and I know these games aren't demanding that, but at least it's something there, and I think they're starting it right, being very quiet about it, and very, again, no additional price as of right now. But I think it is an interesting rollout.
Yeah, most definitely. I have my eye on it. I think as it becomes more robust, and hopefully again by the next episode, I'll have gotten hands on to some degree about it. But yeah, the no additional costing I think is pretty cool because again they do have quite a large user base. So unlike a lot of the other services that jumped in, like if you want a Stadia or a Luna, yeah, that's an additional subscription you're gonna have to sign up for, and so you're limited to those people. Where Netflix does have access to anyone with Netflix right now. So the casual, I think it would be smart, and if this doesn't, I'm sure they're working on this if it doesn't exist yet, but maybe that integration where even on your like a Samsung TV, you have your Netflix app, you click it, they have a gaming section there that you can use with like a remote, easy, quick, interactive, maybe like quick time action type things. As I see a lot of opportunities for them to kind of tap into that casual market, and then once they add controller support and they make the game collection a little bit more robust, tap into a little bit more of like the in quotations hardcore gaming populace as well. So I see there's potential here. As it stands right now, there's not much to go off of to think that it would succeed, but I think there's tremendous progress here, or possibilities here, just because of the sheer size of their user base and the fact that you don't need to sign up for anything additional. So your average person, they're like, oh, that looks kind of cool. If you have Netflix, you can play it. So that's a pretty awesome selling point there if they're able to maintain that.
Yeah, I mean, and they have IP robust. I mean, so many contracts. Not only they sign. I think they have like a League of Legends show now, so maybe they can incorporate something there and different partnerships. We got the Witcher show, Stranger Things. There's all these IPs. Castlevania,
DMC.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see. Like, there's some potential. Again, I don't think you're getting blockbuster Mortal Kombat 12 on there, but I don't think that's what they're striving for either.
Yeah. I agree. I think, and it's obviously supposed to be complementary at the moment, just by the release structure of it. It's supposed to be something that complements the regular media streaming experience, not necessarily them foraying to compete with Nintendo. So I think as long as they keep their intentions fairly narrow and don't try to do too much, I can see it working out.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so that's all the stories we had for you guys this week. A pretty interesting group of stories this weekend. Thankfully, by the next episode, GTA will be out by that point. Forza will be out by that point. A number of games that are coming out. Maybe even Pokemon, too. I'm not 100% sure on that. I need to look at that. But, a number of games are coming out that I will be spinning into, and I know you'll be playing as well. So we'll have lots to talk about in the following episode. So I hope you guys enjoyed. This was the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jabril, and I'm here with
Steve. Hope you guys enjoyed, and take care.
And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.